Just to back the story up just a little bit, when I found out that he had filed for divorce and everything. And around this time, I had done hacked into his email, so I was more focused on the fact that he was around here cheating with all these goddamn women. Like, it was just so much going on. Like, I found out he was cheating on me. I found out he had got this woman pregnant, but she had lost the baby. So of course, I'm trying to formulate this all in my mind, like deal with all this what I got going on. I got issues with the baby and stuff, and I'm trying to also, how we women are. We find out something like this, especially with your husband, like if it's your boyfriend. Okay, you might cuss him out or whatever and then move on. But when it's your husband, you trying to let everybody know what the heck is going on. Like, you done got blindsided with everything, but at the same time, you trying to warn them so they don't fall victim to the foolery or whatever. Because I mean, this dude was lying to all these goddamn women. He had every last one of them believing that he was over in Iraq, so that wasn't a lie. He was over there. But when he came back, every one of the people he was talking to was going to be his wife. He was going to be with them and stuff like that. So I guess he was trying to pick the litter or whatever, whoever he wanted to be with. So of course, when I found out this information, I'm notifying them and letting them know, hey, look, I'm sorry he did this to y'all, but he already married. So until he get a work with me, he can't marry y'all. And letting them know how, he had done did us or whatever with me and the kids. And literally all of them was really sympathetic. Like, nobody really gave me any pushback. Like, all of them was like, something seemed kind of strange and off with him when we were, almost all of them had the same story. So you knew the women wasn't lying because they didn't know about each other. The only person that knew about them was me. They didn't know about each other. At least I didn't thought they did at the time. So it's like news to them. So I've always took the stance, like, if you're in a relationship with somebody, you don't get mad at the person that they're cheating on you with. No, you get mad at the person that's cheating on you, because these people don't commit to you. These people don't probably being lied to just like you are. So my issue's not with the other woman, but at the same time, I'm going to let them know what's going on, And they was all really nice and stuff like that. Nobody really came at me nasty, being that I'm contacting them through emails, or some of my phone numbers, I'm calling them and I'm letting them know what's going on. And matter of fact, I remember this one girl. Now she took it hard, but she was like, she glad she had listened to her dad, because come to find out, this girl, she was wealthy. Her family was like filthy rich. And I really think that he probably would have been with her had, if I hadn't found out everything that I found it and kind of messed that up for him. But this girl father had done spent all this money, because apparently what I did not know was, where I'm thinking like, well, how all this stuff getting done? Initially his mom, she filed for the divorce, but he came home just like everybody, because so I kept seeing soldiers coming home, and I'm like, well, when is he gonna come home? And it was always an excuse up until I found out what was going on, why he they keep delaying him off and all that. But come to find out, he had actually went on his arm. They called it R&R. Rest and relaxation, like it's time to kind of get away from and give you a break and then come back. He had went home to his mom's house, where he had met other women as well, and reconnected with this one particular woman that he had met when we had separated. And of course, I found all this out once I actually got down a list of women and ended up getting it with her. And so I'm talking to this girl, and she's telling me how this one lady, she's telling me how her dad done spent all this money on his wedding, and as soon as he get back to the States, they were going to get married and all this other stuff. And I'm like, girl, how you gonna get married to him and he's still married? Like, so she was the one, she took it kind of hard because of the fact that she really thought that they were, gonna be able to get married. So he ended up She ended up breaking it off with him. Of course, when he found out I was calling everybody, of course he gonna call me and get pissed off at me. But Negro, what you pissed off at me for? You the one, right? If you wanted to divorce me, you should have just said that and did whatever you wanted to do. Like, all this going behind people's back, lying to all these goddamn women, having all these baby. And here was the thing with the whole baby, you know, God rest his soul or her soul, because nobody wants to lose a child. But sir, how was you going to bring the Iraqi woman back here with your child? So you were just going to have some child over there, living in, you know, in those conditions? I mean, I could probably see him doing it, being that, you know, in the end, he really wasn't there for the ones I had with him after everything we had went through. But that's just goes to speak to a person's character. I could never do that to anybody. I could never, you know. And this woman, she was so heartbroken, but she ended up writing him too when she had found out. And I had seen another email where she had reached back out to him, and she was just like, I mean, you could feel her pain through her email after she had found out, and she was like reminiscing on the fact that she had been pregnant, and how was he going to do all this for her, and there's nothing he could say to her ever again because now she knows the truth and all this other stuff, you know, because I had informed everybody what was going on. But then the biggest clincher came to me where my friend, whose husband was in the Army as well, and he was a recruiter. Her husband was actually looking up some stuff, you know, because after she had untold her husband what he had and did, he was like, what? You know, so he, you know, he's trying to see for himself, you know. But when he went to go search for that, he ended up stumbling upon another announcement online, and it was that, and I'm like, maybe you got somebody else. And it was like, no, this is him. I mean, because they got their picture and everything. That's him, you know. He had done proposed to this other lady, and they were getting engaged back in Illinois. And coincidentally, she was one of the women that I had talked to. And now when I first initially talked to her, she was all, I'm so sorry. I would never do another woman like this. This, you know, I've been through this myself. I've been married like I think at that time she had been married like 5 times. So she was like, I don't understand why men do this to women, and I could never do this to another black. She was a black woman, a black woman. She had 4 kids, just like I had. Well, I had 5 now because of my son. So I was pregnant with my son. And all of them was girls. So she had 4 girls. I asked her, was any of his kids, how did they meet? And she was like, they had met. Now her story to me was they had met. When he had initially, she said he had came there right before he went over to Iraq back home in Illinois. So that lined up with when me and him was arguing. He had left. So, you know, her story wasn't hard to believe. So I'm like, oh, okay. So, and she was like, I knew he was a liar. I'm not going to be with him and all this other stuff, you know. And she was telling me and sharing some of her story with me, how she had went through this with her ex-husband, and he did her so wrong, and he wasn't doing this and he wasn't doing that. And I'm just listening, you know, relating to her story or whatever. And I'm apologizing to her, telling her I'm sorry that, you know, my husband did this to you, you know, but clearly this is who he is, you know. And not only is he doing this to you, he's doing this to 19 other women and his current wife. So, I mean, hey, who's special here, right? So, at the end of that conversation, she basically was telling me how it was over with him. You know, she wished me the best. She would never want to harm me, you know, or whatever. Now, mind you, this was all before the husband had found the news thing online about their wedding, right? So I'm like, did this chick just sit up here and lie to me? I mean, the whole time she was playing like, because she never mentioned anything about, she just said they won't be together. But no, these are actual plans where y'all are getting married and stuff, you know? And so I had to deal with. The fact that, okay, I'm seeing now my husband is now engaged to another woman. Again, another woman. I'm like, this dude this boy is out of his damn mind. Like, how many wives is probably going to be able to have around him? So, During that time, of course, like I told you, I had to end up hiring an attorney to try to represent me because I couldn't do but so much. Being in Georgia and everything was in Illinois, that he had did. Make a long story short, he ended up coming back to the house, coming back home, not back to the house. By then, I ended up having our son. He was back in the States at the time I ended up having my son. And of course, he was going full-fledged with, he said he wanted the divorce. You know, he was out of the marriage or whatever. And that was pretty much it as far as he was concerned with our relationship. You know, he was moving on with his life. He didn't want nothing to do with me. He really addressed the kids or whatever. So I'm like, okay, I mean, you're not gonna talk about absolutely nothing. I mean, you ain't even coming over here to address me, to face me with all the stuff that you don't put me through while you was gone. Man, it was just like the rage was just building up. So for the fact that he didn't even want to address the issues about what was going on, he didn't want to face it and stuff like that. He didn't want to face me. That just made the rage in me just go like really go at an all-time high. And really, you know, all the stuff I thought about, you know, I still was trying not to hurt you. I could have done a lot of stuff to hurt you, but I tried not to do that, you know. And you ain't even giving a consideration to the fact that you know, I'm your wife. We got kids. You're not even trying to talk to me about what you're going to do to help get us out of here because, mind you, we in Georgia now. I'm not working. You know, I don't have anything at this point. He's a sole provider and everything. And he didn't want to discuss nothing. You know, he didn't want to talk to me. He didn't want to discuss nothing. Of course, when he came back to the States, he was trying to get everything reversed, like, because all the AER loans that I had took out. So he was like, how they let you take out AER loans? This was prior to me getting my hands on the money when we didn't have anything. So he was trying to get that reversed because he was pissed off that I had that. I mean, he was just trying all kind of stuff. At that point, he was on his little rampage, trying to do what he was doing. Then I had the one that swore to me she would never do this to another person. Well, apparently they had untalked and figured out that, okay, out of all these women, they were going to stay together. So he had done, at some point, he moved her to Georgia where we were, and they were staying off post while we were still on post. And this was prior to him getting his divorce for namesake or whatever. So then, of course, the harassment started with that whole situation. And so I'm going to JAG, the military lawyers, trying to get help because I'm like, what am I going to do? I mean, here he is. He was threatening to take my children. He was like, you don't have anything. The kids are going to be with me and all this. I'm like, over my head. You ain't getting these. And she definitely ain't going to put her hands on my kids. Right. And so, he would never really come about the house. Like, he was telling me to give him his car back because he needed it for his new family. And I needed to move out of the house because, this was his wife with his kids. And I'm like, your kids? Well, one of them yours? I mean, I'm real confused now because I'm like, the story I was fed was she just met you in December. So how 4 kids yours? Like, right? So he was like, these are my kids. I'm taking care of my kids. You and your kids need to go. I say, you sound real ignorant, real dumb, telling me that me and my kids, you know, 3 of these kids are yours, right? I say, even if you don't want to act like, you know, all of a sudden that you ain't a part of my older 2 kids' life, these 3 are definitely yours. So, what do you mean, like, me and my kids got to get out? So he was basically trying to pressure me into moving out of the house so that way he could move her in. But we weren't going nowhere because, like, where was it going to go at, sir? I didn't have any money other than the the little bit of money I ended up getting from him after that certain point. But of course, I was spending it because I was spending it with lawyers. I was trying to take care of bills to catch up on stuff that he had neglected to pay for. I was trying to eventually, since it's and I got to this point, I'm trying to figure out what's my next move, where me and the kids are gonna go. So I gotta put money to the side in order to be able to get me a place. I ain't got no job, so who won't give me a place at that point, you know? I was in the church, so people kind of knew, a couple of the sisters in the church knew my situation, and they was there, and they was like, well, if we have to, you know, you and the kids can come stay with us, you know. And I was like, nah, I didn't want to be a burden on nobody with my kids. I had to find what I needed to do. Remind you, I'm just having a baby. Like my son was little, so he was breastfed, so it was just like so much that was going on, to the point where sometimes this woman would go up to the school. Now, it was just my 4 kids that was in school. My older 2 girls, they were in school, but at that time they was like elementary, middle school, and stuff like that. So at one point they was all in the same school, and then my son, he stayed home with me. He would him and her would go up to the school, you know, and then they would see the kids. I guess she was trying to introduce, you know, her as his wife and so it was confusing them, because they was like, you know, why is Daddy bringing this lady up to the, you know, so you're trying to keep all that from them, and so they won't have to deal with it or whatever. He had these kids with him, and he was saying it was his kids and stuff like that. So he's trying to introduce the kids to her kids while they're in school, because that's really the only time he had access to them, because he would never come to the house. And she was trying to play stepmama of the year and stuff like that. And of course, then I started getting harassing emails telling me that they were going to take my kids. Those were girl had made up in her mind. She was like, these are my kids. These are not your kids. I'm going to take my kids. You and your other 2, they can go. But those 3 are ours. And so I'm like, girl, get a damn clue. I said, this was the same woman that was telling me that, you know, you wouldn't put another woman through this. And so me and her end up exchanging back and forth. Either it was from emails, because she just constantly kept calling me. She was calling me, she was emailing me and stuff like that. I guess just trying to break me down or whatever. Because she was basically just trying to tell me, it's time for you to move on, because I'm here, this is my husband, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, this chick is delusional as hell. I was like, girl, before I'm done with him, you better love him for him, because he ain't gonna have nothing for you to love him for. So then, so this girl had done told me, she don't need his money as long as he get her a grilled cheese sandwich. That's all she needed. I'm like, well, you a cheap ass. All you need is a grilled cheese. That's all it took with you. But of course she trying to be funny or whatever, just trying to tell me, oh, she's here and she's here to stay or whatever. So it became a constant battle between me, him, and her. And on top of that, his mother as well, because it was like, I'm fighting all of them. I'm fighting, verbally fighting with my ex-husband. My husband at the time, he was my husband. I'm verbally fighting with his mistress. I'm verbally fighting with his mom, because she's telling me, you know, she's attacking me from emails and calls and stuff. I'm like, look, I ain't got time for all this. I got kids I got to deal with. I got to try to figure out what's my next move or whatever. So all this stuff was going on. Now, during that time, I did file for support. So I had went to Georgia and I had filed for a support order, for like a temporary order, something until something had happened or whatever, or we could figure out what was going to happen with this. I can either get kicked out and brought back to Georgia. So initially they heard my case in Georgia, and based off of all the evidence that I had shown him, and I had it all. I had where he was, cheating. I went to his rear detachment. I had emails. I had all my thing presented up, and they granted me support. They granted me temporary support, and they had granted me child support with stipulations. So the stipulation was, as long as I was inside the house, that all he had to do was pay me like $300 and something, and it ended up being like 100 and something for spouse support. But if we moved out, then it would jump up to like 300 and something, and then the child support would go up to 966 at that time for 43 kids. But of course we were still in housing, so we couldn't get most of it was, we could only get the small portion that they said as long as we was in housing, because at that time the government wasn't that night. They let me got the AER loans and stuff because I was his wife before all this other stuff had happened, but they wasn't really enforcing the fact that he wasn't financially taking care of us, because they told me, as long as you're in government quarters, that's really all he have to do. And I'm like, what? When did y'all start doing this? And like I said, if it wasn't for his that sergeant that still stepped in and made sure we got what we needed in order to have in the house, him and his wife, they even donated stuff to us and stuff like that, we would have been in some trouble, because military wasn't concerned about him taking care of us. They said as far as they're concerned, he was taking care of us because we was living in that house. If we wanted any type of other support, then we would have to move out of the house. And then it will go on a contingency thing, because he still had needed a place to stay as well. So he wouldn't get the full BAH and stuff and the benefits for, but they would split it, because if we wasn't living in the house, that means he had to live in the barracks, and so all that stuff had to get paid for and all that other stuff. So basically they told me that you can stay here as long as you're his wife, but that's all we could do. I mean, we can't force him to do anything else. You have to kind of get your job or something, to help you and your kids, or go to court and get a court order. So they was really the ones who made me go get the support, because other than that, they weren't going to do it. And I didn't want to keep putting that sergeant in the position where he could possibly get in trouble, now that I knew that he couldn't make him do it, but he was making him do it. He was making him go out and get stuff for the house and stuff like that, because if he didn't do it, I guess he was being hard on him or whatever. So I wasn't trying to pull anybody else into my stuff. So I went and I got the temporary order and stuff like that. And of course that became a problem, because now he was pissed off, because now you in my house and you get money from me. It's time for you to get out of there. That's the stance that he took, because he needed a house for his new wife and his kids. And I'm like, yo, new wife? How you got a new wife and you ain't even first divorced? But that's the stance that he was taking. Well, when it all boiled down and he got the divorce for namesake, of course, and I'm like, okay, me and my kids are in this house. Like, what it leaves us? Like, where does this leave me and the kids? He got a divorce for all they know. All he has to do is bring that thing back to the military and say, I'm divorced from her, and that's that. Well, lo and behold, in the middle of all that, before he got the divorce, he ended up getting married to the lady. So when she was saying she was his wife, they had a certificate that said she was his wife, right? And so that's the whole push as to why they was trying to get me out. Now I'm confused as crap, because I'm like, how in the world you get married before you get divorced, sir? Like, how does this work? First of all, how do you even file for a divorce and you ain't even first here? That's the first step. Now and now you're divorced, and like me and the kids were out, so he didn't do it right away like I thought he was going to do it. But so I don't know what was going on, whether they was having issues or whatever, I don't know. But he didn't do it right away after he got it. But within a couple of months, like I think probably about 2, maybe 1 or 3 months, he ended up notifying the base that he had the divorce while I was trying to get my stuff in court. And so once they found out he had a divorce, of course, they came to me and told me that me and the kids had to, move, because I was no longer his wife. So, and I'm like, well, he got it illegally because I'm trying to still figure out, according to the courts here, from what I'm finding out, what I'm learning, it's not even, he can't do this. So I'm like, so they was like, well, unfortunately, until you can figure that out, all we know is he has a decree for a divorce, right? So they gave me 30 days in order to get out of get out of the house. So now I have to try to find a place to stay. He's threatening if I take my kids out of the state, he's going to get me for a kid, for just up and taking his kids out of the state. But okay, so what do we do at this point? So I'm frantically looking for jobs, trying to, secure something. So that way I can have some type of money coming in order to be able to pay for this place. Because at this point, I had a little bit left over, stashed away or whatnot, from various people I hadn't spread the money out for, but it was thinning out because even when they initially kicked in that temporary support order, I caught HE double hockey sticks trying to get anything out of it from him, and he was trying to tell the courts that the court order wasn't valid. It was something I did that I got that was a lie, and I had to prove that no, this is an actual valid court hearing. No, ain't no I did anything. Because he was telling them, oh, she knows how to dock up papers, and I'm like, Doc, I don't know how to dock up nothing. I said, I don't do nothing illegal. I do stuff the right way. So because he was telling them, she went to school for law and she knows how to do this. So it was fake. So now I'm having not to only go through what I'm going through, I'm having to prove that, no, I'm not doing anything illegal. This was legal documentation, right? So I had to end up getting a letter from the courts and stuff like that. I had to get the paper sealed and stuff, and to pretty much prove what I was saying was correct, and when they finally realized, no, he was the one who was lying, not me. But at the same time, I had to get out of there. Well, thank God, God always watches out for us. He touched this lady heart because I was putting in so many applications for a place to stay. Now, mind you, when I left, I didn't leave in bad terms. My credit history was good, other than the fact that I had the repo now on me. I had credit rental history very good. So, but the fact is that I didn't have a job, so who was going to rent to me with no freaking job? I could show them letters that I had money coming in and I was applying for stuff, but I had no job. I'm like, I got this lined up. I don't care. I go do whatever. I just I'll get work to make sure me and my kids have a place to stay. I can't leave this place because he said if I do, I'm going to lose my kids. So God touched this one lady heart. I remember going into her office, and I don't know if she herself was going through something as to why she allowed me to get that place, but she was like, "Okay, honey," and she's like, she was a white lady. She was like, "I'm gonna trust you because you seem like you're a determined woman, and I understand having kids." She said, "So I'm gonna let you get this place," and I was like, "Oh, thank you, Jesus," So she ended up giving me the place. And of course, I had to move myself out of the house, make sure, my friend that was there, she was like, "Girl, leave this place a mess. I wouldn't clean up now." I was like, "Nah, I'm not like that." No, I said, you don't do evil for evil, because the son he'll eventually get his one day. So I cleaned up the place. I scrubbed everything down. My mama used to clean military quarters when I was younger, and growing up, me and my sister, well, at one point, which is me, I used to go help her clean. So I knew exactly what they were looking for. I mean, that place was spotless when we left that house. Packed up our stuff. My friend and her husband, they helped me move people from the church, helped me move to get us out of the house or whatever. And he moved them right in. Like, as soon as we was out, they were living in the house. So now it was, my kids have to deal with, okay, Daddy just literally, why is she living in our house? Why is she in our, so this was what they was coming to me like, that's my room. So the kids fussing and stuff like that. I'm like, no, this is your room. This is your house now. It was this little place. It was an old ran down place, really. It was like a little duplex thing, where the two houses kind of attached to each other, but it was ours. I had done fixed it up with my stuff. Matter of factly, it barely hold half of the stuff I had because, like I said, at the time, I had a lot of stuff. And we end up getting the place, but then it was like, he tried to start tormenting me outside. I end up applying for jobs. I end up getting a job offer, and it took a couple of months. I ended up getting a job offer from Heritage Bank. I had went there, was for a sales position with the bank, and I was good at doing sales from previous jobs that I had over years. So I had my little my little skills going on, and I had ended up landing a job and stuff like that. But I hadn't heard back. Well, I didn't know I had landed a job. I had went to the interview and all that. And I was waiting to hear back from him. Well, during all this time, things started getting really crazy with him. Like, of course, since they were still going to school on the base, at one point until I had to literally take them out and put them in the school outside the base because he had access to them. Because I'm trying to keep their life as normal as freaking possible while I'm going through all this other stuff, with my ex at the time, his new current wife, and I'm still trying to figure out, like, how is this your wife? But okay. So I'm going through all this, trying to deal, trying to get myself back together, trying not to leave or whatever. Well, we had this one incident where he came to the house and he was drunk. And he had done, and really, I don't even know how the boy found out what I lived at, because when it came to him coming to see the kids, I always met him someplace, unless he followed me or something, and I just wasn't thinking like that at the time. But he came up to my house. Normally it was just me literally meeting him places, or either he'd meet him up at the school or whatever, and he'll tell me. I said, as long as you tell me, so I know, and you don't be just making up no pop-ups and going to get my kid, especially with all these threats that y'all got, because I'll go to the police and let them know that y'all talking about taking my kid. But of course I knew he really couldn't go nowhere, because where he gonna go at? He in the military. Unless he PCSing, we know exactly where to go get you at, right? So until he came over to my house one time, and that kind of shocked me, because I'm like, how does he even know where I live at? I never even told this boy where I live, right? He was drunk, banging on my door. Open up the door, let me in. I'm like, boy, you better take your behind on before I call the cops. I mean, my son, he was still young. The kids, they was hollering and screaming. Of course, some of my oldest one, because she loved her daddy so much, she was hollering, daddy, mommy, let daddy in. I'm like, no, I was like, you better take my front door. So he was like, let me in. Next thing you know, he just started breaking down, crying. I'm so sorry. You're my family. Oh my gosh, just let me in. I mean, he kind of like freaked me out at that point. And I'm like, look, you gotta go. So eventually I end up having to call the cops on it, because I just didn't know what his frame of mind was or whatever. So the cops came out there. They instructed me to get a restraining order against him, so that way he just can't be popping up at the house or whatever. And at the time that the cops was there, he even kind of got into it. And I'm sure the only reason they didn't arrest him was because he was in the military, and maybe his first sergeant came out there and spoke on his behalf. I don't know what happened, because he didn't go to jail. But him and the cop ended up getting into it. And he was saying, well, you can't keep me from my kids. And he was like, well, sir, with the way you acting, he was like, I wouldn't let you get the kids, So he was like, he told him, he instructed me. He was like, well, ma'am, whenever you have to, even after you get your restraining order, make sure you're around somebody when you do an exchange, even if you feel like you need to call the police officer, and we'll be there with you to hand off your kid. So that way, if he don't bring you back your kids, then we got him, So, and he was like, well, you can't make me. These are my kids. He was like, no, actually, they might be your kids, but actually she has custody of your kids. The kids are with her, But at this time, I really didn't have like custody. I had a paper that had support on there. It had temporary support, it had child support. It didn't have custody. So that's why I didn't want to mess myself over without him, by me keeping my kids from him. I didn't want to also be breaking laws my darn self, because I'm violating something by not letting him see his kids. So we end up eventually getting back into the courts in order to get a final judgment to seal everything up. And that was when I learned what really happens and how the whole process happens in Georgia. Well, so now I have the restraining order. I have the incidents where I had to call the cops, trade-offs where after I had a restraining order, when it was time for him to come and get the kids, he would, our spot was either at the police officer's station at McDonald's, where a police officer would come to meet us. And most of this, after I had got a restraining order, he never showed up. So I had it documented where he was supposed to be there, emails where he would never show up, and I had something to email telling him, where were you? We was waiting there with the police officer, you never showed, and stuff like that. So I had all my stuff documented to prove what I was saying, because at this point, before it can be no longer he say, she say, I had the witnesses of the police department and stuff like that on my side, especially when he took me through what he took me through when it came to the whole military situation. So I had to dot all my I's and cross all my T's with this one, right? So we ended up getting back into the courthouse and to finalize everything. And in my head, I'm thinking we're finalizing the temporary order, the child support, to make it permanent, because remember, everything was temporary depending on if we moved off the base or not. And now I was off the base and my rent was going up. At this particular time, I still didn't know if I had a job or not. I just had money, and so we went to court. I pleaded my case, of course. Thank God. The judge was also, because a lot of people don't realize, just because they're judges and stuff like that, they don't necessarily mean that they know civilian and military law. But thank God, because this was a military town, the judge was actually a former person that was in the military. So he knew exactly how everything was supposed to go, right? So we went through our court proceedings. I was accompanied by a lady from the church who came there with me. He came there with his wife, and he came there, and boy, she was looking a mess. She came there with a dirty, stained up t-shirt. Hell was mad. I was like, come on, baby, if you're gonna do this right. You gotta present yourself up in here. Me, I'm up in I got my suit on, because of course I'm representing myself. I had all my stuff laid out, baby. You couldn't tell me I wasn't no attorney up inside that courthouse, right? He had his uniform on. Of course, he came in there with his formals on and stuff like that, trying to present like he's a upstanding soldier and stuff like that. But when them details come out, baby, we're gonna show them just how not upstanding that you really are. But so I presented my case, of course, and then of course he told his case and everything, and then when it came down to the support, he was like, well, Your Honor, I don't think it's right, because I have kids I have to take care of. I have 4 kids. And he was like, well, hold up, how you got 4 kids? He was like, when was y'all married? And so I was like, so I gave him the date when we was married. He's like, where was you married? I said, well, this time here in Georgia. We was married right here. And so then provided the marriage license and all, so I could show him. And then he was like, so sir, how are you married already? Like, he was like, well, how are you married? You ain't even officially got an actual divorce yet. He said, isn't this what we're here for? So the judge, I was like, well, actually, I thought we was here for the judgment, because apparently he got his divorce already. So, that's when the judge was like, well, sir, how did you get a divorce? I thought from the story I heard, you was over in Iraq when because, all this stuff had came out. And so he was like, I was, but I had my mom to file for my divorce. And so now all the pictures, all the things coming together. So he was like, I had my mom file for my divorce. And he was like, well, first of all, how did your mother file for your divorce? there's nowhere you can go in the United States where somebody can file for a divorce for you. And of course, unless they're an attorney. Is your mom an attorney? And then he was like, no, I gave her a power of attorney. And he was like, that don't work that way. They don't work that way. In order for you to have legally did this the correct way, you yourself or your wife needed to go down there and file for a divorce and do it that way. So he was like, so what, well, hold on, why don't I see this in my court files? I don't see a divorce in my court files. I said, Your Honor, you're not going to see one in your files, because he apparently went back to his home state that he was claiming his home state, but it really wasn't his home state, because where he joined the military was in Illinois, in Florida, not in Illinois. So he was like, how did you do that? I mean, he was like, okay. He said, what did your ID say? He said, Florida. He said, so how did you claim Illinois as your home state when your ID says Florida? And he was like, I don't know the technicalities of it. My lawyer had handled it. He was like, because there is no technicalities of it. He said, in order for you to file, he said, let me tell you something, soldier. I was a soldier. I mean, he said, you might see me in this robe today, but I was a soldier, so I know exactly how everything worked. He was like, in order for you to have done that, you would have had to be able to claim residency. I mean, do you got a house in Illinois? And he was like, no. He said, well, do you have car registered in Illinois? He was like, no. He said, clearly your ID say Florida, so how is Illinois your home state? So then he was like, I don't know how they worked it out, but they got it done. He said, well, let me tell you how they worked it out. They didn't work it out. I don't know what this is, because this is not a legal divorce. So he was like, yes, it is, Your Honor. I got the papers. And he was like, I'm telling you, it's not a legal divorce. He's saying, and I can't enter this as a legal divorce knowing that all this stuff is in here. So he said, now what I can do is give her a final judgment for her child support order, and I can give her a final judgment for, her allotment. He was like, well, Your Honor, that's the thing. I can't afford to pay this. I got 4 kids that I need to take care of. So he was like, no. See, that's where you're wrong, soldier. He was like, your responsibility is with this woman here, who is your wife, and your kids that you have with her. He was like, well, ma'am, how many kids you have? I said, well, I got 5, but only 3 are his. I said the 2 I had before I met him. So he was like, okay. He said, so sir, this is your kids. You got 3 kids. So he called out our kid's name. He said, let me just confirm, these are your kids, correct? And then he was like, yeah. And so that's when the whole thing came up about my son and his. I said, well, according to the way he was able to get out of this in Illinois, he told them that the child I was pregnant with was not his. When I'm trying to figure out who else is it, like that. So then he was like, well, are you questioning the paternity of your child? And he was like, no, Your Honor, I don't question the paternity. He said, so then why did you go to the court and tell the courts that this wasn't your son? And so then he said, well, it wasn't me, it was my mom. And he was like, well, once again, your mom can't do anything for you. And in order for her to have done it, you had to at some point approve some of this or something, I'm assuming, because just because she did it doesn't mean anything. This is your wife. These are your kids. You are the husband, right? So he was like I said, none of this is legal, right? And so he was like, Miss Cruz, he was like, that's my name. He was like, you need to file, or either you need to file for a proper divorce, because the only thing I can give you is a final judgment. There is no divorce, like that. So I was like, Your Honor, I don't have